Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. The salt shaker tipped. That's how it started. Not the story, the silence. It was supposed to be a regular Thursday night dinner. Nora's family does this thing where everyone shows up wearing fake smiles and real jewelry, pretending they're closer than they are. I usually stay quiet, chew slow, nod often. But that night, as I reached across the table to pass the bread basket, the salt shaker tipped, and apparently that was hilarious. "Oh, Carlton," Nora snorted, loud enough to pull everyone's eyes. "You managed to mess up salt. How is that even possible?" I tried to smile. I really did. But then her uncle barked a laugh like it was the best joke he'd heard in years. Her cousin muttered something about Mr. Butterfingers. And Nora? She leaned in, resting her chin on her palm with this mocking look, like I was a child she was reluctantly raising. "Maybe next time just clap when the adults are talking, sweetie." Sweetie. It wasn't just the insult, it was the tone. The casual dismissal. Like I was a fly buzzing too close to her Chardonnay. My fingers tightened around the napkin in my lap. I stared at my plate. Mashed potatoes I didn't even want anymore. My throat tightened. I was a grown man shrinking in real time, surrounded by clinking forks and fake pearls. And then quietly, too quietly, a voice cut through. "That's enough." It was Ren, her younger sister, the one who usually said nothing, the one who usually disappeared behind big sweaters and earbuds and books no one else at the table ever asked about. She stood. She didn't ask permission. Then she did something I'll never forget. She walked around the table, past her father's surprised grunt, past her mother's frozen fork midair, and extended her hand toward me. "Carlton, come with me, now." My wife blinked. "Ren, what the hell are you doing?" But Ren didn't flinch. Her hand stayed open, steady. She looked at me like I mattered, like she'd just been waiting for me to realize it too. So I stood. And that's when Nora said something that flipped the entire table, metaphorically. "Oh, please, don't tell me you're still hung up on him, Ren." Her mother gasped. Her father cursed under his breath. And I realized I knew nothing about the woman I married. The second the front door clicked shut behind us, I expected Ren to let go of my hand. She didn't. We were standing on the porch, bathed in that dim amber glow from the porch light. I could still hear the muffled laughter from inside, their forks clinking, the artificial joy bouncing off the walls like we were characters in a sitcom I didn't agree to star in. My wife had just humiliated me in front of her entire family like I was a party trick gone stale, and now I was out here, holding her sister's hand. It should have felt wrong, but it didn't. Felt steady, like someone had just thrown me a rope while I was drowning in plain sight. Ren didn't say anything for a few seconds. She just stood there, holding my hand and staring at the quiet street like she was rehearsing something. Then, without looking at me, she said, "You need to know something, and you need to hear it from me, not from her." I swallowed. "Okay." She finally turned to me, and what she said next made my legs feel like wet paper. "Nora's been cheating on you, Carlton, with my ex." My ears buzzed. It was like my brain refused to process the sentence, like it stalled out mid-load. I blinked at her, searching her face for any hint of sarcasm, mischief, a prank, anything. But her eyes were dead serious. With Drew," I croaked. "Drew, the guy who used to come over for game nights. The one I helped move when he bought that downtown condo. The guy who gave me beard oil last Christmas like we were buddies." Ren nodded once. "For nearly 6 months. I didn't want to believe it either, but I saw the texts on his phone before I ended things. And then I confronted her. She denied it at first. Then she laughed. Of course she did. That was Nora's thing, turning every confrontation into comedy. She mocked her way out of accountability like it was a superpower. And I'd let her, over and over again. I leaned against the railing and exhaled, a sound that felt like it came from some cave inside me. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because watching her belittle you in there, in front of everyone, like you're a joke she's tired of telling." She shook her head, eyes glassy. "That was it for me. I can't sit and watch you get dragged like this anymore. I won't." I was still frozen, half in shock, half trying not to crumble completely. Then she reached into her coat pocket and handed me something. Her phone. "Read these," she said. I screenshotted everything before I left him. "Just brace yourself." I didn't want to look. I wanted to pretend this was still salvageable, that I could go back inside, finish dessert, drive home, and chalk tonight up to another Nora being Nora moment. But I looked, and what I saw, my knees almost gave out. I didn't even feel the cold anymore. I was standing on the porch, phone in hand, heart in my throat, scrolling through a gallery of betrayal. Ren had labeled the album, "Just in Case." Inside were screenshots, dozens of them, late-night chats, selfies, photos taken inside our living room when I wasn't home. Pictures of Nora lying in bed wearing the t-shirt I bought her for our anniversary, the one she said made her feel safe. She was wearing it for him. But what crushed me the most wasn't the flirtation. It was the planning. One message said, "He won't see it coming. He still thinks I'm just stressed." Another, "Once the loan clears, I'll move the rest into my name. He won't fight it, he's too passive." That's when I had to sit down, right there on the porch steps, next to a wilting flower pot, because my knees gave up on holding the weight of everything I just learned. Ren sat beside me without saying anything. She didn't need to. She had already said enough. I stared at one specific exchange between Nora and Drew. It was dated 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks after Nora had told me she was just feeling overwhelmed and needed space to think. I'd bought her flowers that day. She'd left them on the kitchen counter, unopened. In the chat, she wrote, "He asked if we could go to couples therapy." I laughed. I'm not wasting time explaining how boring he is to a stranger. I felt like I was reading my own obituary, written by the one person I thought would defend me. There were even plans to change the business. My business, Carlton's Custom Blinds. I built it from scratch. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. And according to one of Drew's texts, Nora had mentioned they could rebrand it, make it more modern. And he joked about turning it into a lifestyle brand. A lifestyle brand. Out of blinds. I had no idea it went that deep. I finally whispered. My voice cracked like it didn't belong to me. She's taking everything." Ren reached into her coat again and pulled out a second envelope. It was thick. "What's that?" I asked. "Bank statements. From an account you probably don't know exists." She opened it under her maiden name. Started funneling deposits there 6 months ago. "I work in finance. I know what laundering looks like, even when it's emotional, not criminal." I didn't even have the energy to act shocked anymore. It was like standing in the aftermath of a fire and realizing the ashes used to be your life. "She's waiting for one last transfer to go through," Ren added. "Then she's planning to disappear with him. She already toured a place 2 towns over. I followed her last Friday. That did it. The sadness in me didn't feel like crying anymore. Felt like something colder, something heavier, something that had just reached the edge of its limit. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Not after what Ren showed me. I lay in bed beside Nora, who snored softly like nothing in the world had changed. Meanwhile, I was staring at the ceiling, my pulse ticking like a time bomb in my neck. I kept hearing the words in those messages echo in my mind. How I was too passive. How she laughed about therapy. How she called my life's work a good shell to hijack. And yet, there she was, peacefully dreaming inches away from me, curled up in a position I once thought looked endearing. I didn't wake her. I didn't say a word. The next morning, I packed my tool bag like I was heading out for a regular job. She was still under the covers, half awake, scrolling her phone. "You working at the Ellisons today?" she mumbled without looking up. I just nodded. "Don't forget we have dinner with my parents again Friday. Mom wants to redo the porch lights." The sheer normalcy of her tone almost made me laugh. But it didn't. I just walked out the door. And I didn't go to the Ellisons. I drove 3 towns over, to a storage facility with month-to-month rentals and cameras that didn't work. I paid in cash and unloaded the first box from my trunk, the one with my business records, licenses, and the hard drive backups I made just in case. The second box was heavier, filled with things I knew Nora wouldn't notice missing. Small, important things. Things I planned to keep. I called Ren. She answered on the first ring. "Did you change your mind?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm all in. But I'm not going to explode this thing. I'm going to dissolve it. Quietly. Thoroughly. And she won't know until it's over." Ren hesitated, then said something that surprised me. "I'll help." She wasn't joking. She sent me a list of financial moves to make. Which bank accounts to freeze, how to reroute business invoices, how to quietly cancel Nora's access to the accounts she thought were still shared. It was surgical, and it was oddly satisfying. For once, I wasn't just reacting. I was moving forward. By Thursday, I had already changed my mailing address for the business to a UPS box. I signed a lease for a small office across town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Not ours. Mine. I pulled my name from our joint credit card. I opened a new checking account under my middle name. And I made one final move. I called in a favor from a client, an older man I'd done work for years ago. He was a notary and had a background in small business law. I asked him how to legally remove a spouse from a business filing if that spouse was never formally an employee. He just chuckled and said, "Takes 5 minutes. Come by tomorrow." I didn't tell Nora I loved her that night. She didn't notice. She was too busy texting under the table during dinner and pretending she had food poisoning when I asked her why she wasn't eating. I already knew the answer, but I had one more step before I vanished. And it would happen at that family dinner she reminded me about. The one where her mom wanted new porch lights. The one where she planned to show off. Friday came faster than I was ready for, and yet I'd never been more prepared for anything in my life. Nora was wearing a pale blue dress she used to only pull out on anniversaries. She dabbed on perfume while humming something I couldn't recognize, and the whole act was surreal to watch. Like a snake coiling in slow motion, completely unaware of the axe already raised behind it. She checked her reflection one last time and asked if I was ready to go. I said I was. We got in the car, and the ride to her parents' house was quiet. No music. Just the sound of tires eating up pavement and the occasional chirp from her phone as messages kept coming in. She didn't hide the smirk on her face each time she glanced at the screen. I wondered if it was Drew, or someone else. At that point, I didn't care. I wasn't here for answers anymore. When we arrived, the house was already lit up like a showroom. Her parents always overdid it with the outdoor lights. The porch bulbs were blinding. The lawn looked like it was groomed with tweezers, and every window glowed with warm yellow light like they were trying too hard to prove something. I'd walked into this place dozens of times, always with my head down and my spirit shrinking. But not tonight. We stepped inside and the usual chorus began. Her mom air-kissed the air near Nora's cheek and commented on her weight. Her dad grunted from his recliner. The cousins were gathered around the kitchen island, drinking wine and pretending to be amused by each other. Nora slid seamlessly into her spotlight, tossing her hair and offering passive-aggressive praise like she was auditioning for The Real Housewives of Suburbia. I excused myself after 5 minutes and walked outside. Ren was already there, waiting in her car. She stepped out without saying a word and handed me the envelope. Thicker than before. "You sure?" she asked. "Absolutely." I took a deep breath and headed back inside. Everyone was seated now. The lights dimmed. Dinner was being served. The usual clatter of cutlery and fake laughter filled the room. Nora was glowing, feeding off attention. She raised a glass of wine and clinked it with her uncle's, then turned toward me and said, "Carlton, tell everyone that story about the broken blinds again. The one where you drilled into your own thumb. It's a classic." Everyone chuckled. I stood up, but I didn't smile. I placed the envelope gently in front of her plate. "What's this?" she asked, still laughing. "A story," I said quietly. "One they haven't heard yet." She opened it. Slowly, casually at first. Then her hands stopped moving. Her smile collapsed in stages. Her eyes darted from page to page. Bank statements, screenshots, messages, photos, signatures, timestamps. Her wine glass tilted slightly in her fingers before she set it down with a quiet clink. No one else understood what was happening yet. But they would. Nora finally looked up at me. "You went through my phone?" I shook my head. "No, your sister did. And she gave me everything you thought you could hide." The silence that followed was loud. Her father cleared his throat. Her mother's fork dropped. Her cousin asked, "Is this a joke?" "No," I replied. "This is the part where you all stop laughing at me." And then I left the envelope on the table, nodded to Ren through the window, and walked out of that house for the last time, with my dignity intact and her entire charade crumbling behind me. I thought walking out of that house would feel like release, like breaking through the surface after drowning for months. And for a moment it did. The air outside felt sharper. I could breathe deeper. Ren's car was still idling under the streetlight. I opened the passenger door, sat down beside her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. But the silence didn't last long. My phone buzzed once, twice, then again nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, texts flying in from Nora like rapid fire. The first few were predictable. "What the hell, Carlton? You humiliated me in front of everyone. We need to talk. Now." But then they changed tone. "You're being cruel. I was going to tell you eventually. You're destroying our family." Our family. That part almost made me laugh. Not in a happy way. In that dry, empty way that happens when someone tries to set fire to your life and then blames you for the ashes. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone. Ren glanced over at me as I stared out the windshield. "You okay?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, but I'm not going back. That part I'm sure of." I spent the night at a motel off Route 9. Nothing fancy. Peeling wallpaper, the smell of bleach clinging to the sheets, and a TV that only worked on 2 channels. But it was quiet and it was mine. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the envelope I'd left a copy of for myself. Pages and pages of what I used to be too blind or too scared to see. The next morning, the calls started coming from other people. Nora's mother, her cousin, even her boss. Apparently, she told them I had mental health issues and had a paranoid meltdown, that I was stealing from the business and spiraling. Her narrative was spreading faster than truth ever could. And then came the worst one. My landlord called. "Carlton," he said cautiously, "your wife stopped by this morning asking about removing you from the lease. She said you'd voluntarily moved out and she was staying." My blood ran cold. "Did you let her?" "No," he said. "She didn't have paperwork. But she was convincing." I knew Nora. She wasn't going to take this silently. She would twist every angle, lie to every face, play the victim with an Oscar-worthy performance. And sure enough, when I drove past the house that afternoon, just to see, I noticed something. The blinds were gone. My tools, my design samples, everything related to the business had been pulled out and replaced with candles, pillows, neutral decor. Like I'd never existed there. She was erasing me, but I was already ahead of her. The bank accounts were locked. The business was moved. The name was legally mine. The digital passwords changed. Every door she thought she could walk through was now sealed behind her. She could smear me in stories all she wanted, but the reality was waiting in emails, contracts, and official stamps. And I had copies of everything. Still, it hurt, because for a moment, I almost believed she loved me once. But maybe she only loved what I could build, and now that I had built it, I was disposable. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I went somewhere else, somewhere Nora would never think to look. And that's where I started planning the final move. Not to hurt her, not to expose her, but to disappear in a way she could never undo. I spent the next few days in a town so small it didn't even have a Starbucks. That was intentional. I needed distance, silence, and no familiar faces. I rented a room above a bait shop from an old man who didn't ask questions. He just handed me the key, told me not to feed the raccoon that lived in the dumpster, and went back to his crossword puzzle. It was perfect. The room was bare. A bed, a chipped dresser, and a window that looked out over the woods. No reminders of her. No echoes of my life with Nora. Just space. I didn't tell Ren where I was. I needed time to think. She had helped me more than I deserved, but now it was on me to end this the right way. Not with a fight, not with fire, but with closure on my terms. I used the motel Wi-Fi to log into the business email and forward all active clients my new contact info. I didn't say anything about Nora. I just told them I was relocating operations and thanked them for their loyalty. Most responded kindly. A few asked if I was okay. I didn't reply. Then I drafted the final letter. The one that would end any illusion she still held over me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. Just a calm, detailed record of everything. The evidence, the financial moves, the fact that her access had been removed, the notification sent, and the lawyer's letter confirming she had no legal stake in the company she tried to steal. I attached copies of the documents, screenshots, bank logs, and then I scheduled it to send automatically at 8 a.m. Monday morning. That was important. I wanted her to read it with her first sip of coffee. But that wasn't the last step. There was still one thread left hanging. One question I hadn't answered. Why did Ren really help me? She had risked so much. Siding against her sister, exposing the affair, handing over evidence. That wasn't just kindness. That was personal. So I finally called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey," she said, almost out of breath. "I wasn't sure if you were still alive." I joked dryly. "Barely. Listen, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why me?" There was a pause on the line. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Because 3 years ago I stayed over after a party, remember? You found me crying in the hallway and gave me that weird chipped mug with hot cocoa. You didn't ask why. You didn't make it awkward. You just sat with me until I stopped shaking." I did remember. Vaguely. I thought it was nothing. Ren continued. "You didn't know it then, but that night I found out Drew had cheated, and your wife told me to get over it and stop being dramatic. You just listened, and that meant more than you'll ever know." I leaned back against the creaky wall and closed my eyes. It's strange how the things we do without thinking end up mattering the most. Ren's voice softened. "You're not weak, Carlton. You just kept loving someone who stopped deserving it." I didn't respond. Not right away. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. Later that night, I turned my phone back on and saw only one new message from Nora. It said, "You'll regret this. Promise." I stared at it for a full minute. Then I deleted it. Regret? I think I'd finally run out. The email went out Monday at 8 a.m. Sharp, just like I planned. I didn't wait around to see her reaction. I knew what the message contained, and I knew the moment she opened it, she'd finally realize. This wasn't some bluff. I hadn't snapped. I hadn't lost control. I'd simply chosen not to be her fool anymore. A few days later, a friend from our old neighborhood sent me a video clip. Apparently, Nora had tried to host a relaunch party for the business, turning our once modest custom blinds company into a design-forward lifestyle brand, as she called it. She even invited influencers. But the surprise came when the event coordinator refused her access to the venue because the business license, bank account, and tax ID were all officially under my name, and only mine. She made a scene. She cried, shouted, demanded. Someone caught it on video. She ended up leaving in a rideshare car, mascara streaked, her carefully crafted version of reality unraveling in front of people who used to admire her. And me? I was already gone. I didn't stay in hiding forever. I found a small town that felt quiet and kind, where no one knew my name or asked about my past. I reopened the business on a smaller scale, serving real clients who cared more about quality than image. I finally built the workshop I dreamed of for years, not in the shadow of someone else's ambition, but with my own hands and no one trying to repaint it. Ren and I kept in touch, slowly, cautiously, not as a rebound, not as a revenge plot, just as two people who understood what it meant to be invisible in a room full of noise. And one day, over coffee, the good kind, not motel coffee, she smiled and said, "I'm proud of you." And I realized, for the first time in years, I was proud of me too. I didn't get justice by fighting fire with fire. I got peace by walking away with the truth and letting her collapse under the weight of her own lies. And in doing so, I finally became someone I recognized again. Someone worth being. Now it's your turn. What's a moment in history, personal or global, where someone quietly walked away and changed everything? Drop it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Confessions, where every story reminds us that even the most broken people can rebuild.